Begin the show this evening in the Queen City as the Cincinnati Bengals beat the L.A Rams 19-16 for the Rams. Matthew Stafford, he struggled. He went 18 of 33, threw for 269 passing yards, one touchdown, two interceptions for the Bengals. Joe Burrow had an average game. He went 26 of 49, threw for 259 passing yards, one interception. Jamar Chase had the best game of his season so far, 12 receptions, 141 receiving yards. So he had a nice performance. Here's Joe Burrow after the game.
All the stuff that you weigh when you're making that decision, there is risk to go out there and potentially re-injure it, but there's also a risk to go out there and be 0-3. So I wanted to be out there for my guys, and I was confident that I would be able to do what I needed to get the win. You go 0-3, not only obviously a lot of football left to be played, but 0-3 sounds a lot worse than 1-2, and morale is probably a lot lower when you're 0-3. So it's a big win for us. Good to get on the board. I think we'll be able to put something together now.
That was Joe Burrow in the press conference after the Bengals secured their first win of the season, 19-16 over the L.A Rams. So my biggest takeaway from this Bengals win over the L.A Rams is, first and foremost, I want to talk about Joe Burrow. Obviously, Joe Burrow was not 100% in this matchup, and I felt like when I watched the game, the offense, they could not get into a rhythm overall because Joe Burrow was compromised. But they still were able to move the football effectively, and I thought they did a great job at being able to create mismatches for Jamar Chase in the open field. You saw Jamar Chase had his best game of the season, 12 receptions, over 140 receiving yards for the game. The Bengals had 242 passing yards. And so I thought they did a great job having Jamar Chase in space. And the secondary for the Rams, they had no answers for Jamar Chase. I thought T. Higgins dropped a lot of passes. And for the game, T. Higgins, he 2 receptions for only 21 receiving yards. If T. Higgins catches a few passes, instead of dropping those passes, maybe the Bengals could capitalize those chances that they had once they got inside the 40-yard line, because they settled for field goals multiple times in this game. McPherson ended up hitting 4 field goals. And so those are opportunities for the Bengals offensively to be able to put points up on the board. And I thought you could tell that the Bengals are starting to get into a rhythm, and then you have a drop pass by T. Higgins, and it throws the entire offensive rhythm off. And I feel like as the season goes along, Joe Burrow is not going to get more healthier. That injured calf will not improve as the season goes along. And you look at Joe Burrow so far this year, Joe Burrow has 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 563 passing yards. He's only completing 55% of his passes. He's obviously not himself. And in order for the Bengals to be true Super Bowl contenders, they need Joe Burrow to be at his best, because Joe Burrow is what makes the Bengals go. He's their best player, and he is everything to the Cincinnati Bengals. When I think about Patrick Mahomes, you got to think about Andy Reid and that Chiefs organization. When Aaron Rodgers was in Green Bay, the Packers organization was a great organization. It wasn't just all about Aaron Rodgers. It wasn't just all about Brett Favre either. And with the Buffalo Bills over the last few years, it's not just about Josh Allen. They got a respected head coach in Sean McDermott. They have a respected organization as well. And when Tom Brady was with the New England Patriots, the Patriots organization, led by Robert Kraft, they were also a part of the reason why Tom Brady was able to win 6 Super Bowls while he played for the New England Patriots. But when I think about the Cincinnati Bengals, it's all about Joe Burrow, because this is a Bengals ownership that's not trustworthy. Since I'm 32 years old, and Mike Brown has not been a trustworthy type of owner since I've been alive. And the organization, they have questionable draft picks. They're not a team that is aggressive in the free agent market. They've gotten better over the last few years, so Bengal fans don't go crazy. They have gotten better over the last few years. But for the most part, the Bengals organization is not an organization that you think of when you think about championship organizations like Green Bay, like New England. Even the Denver Broncos won Super Bowls in the John Elway era, and even Peyton Manning got a Super Bowl for the Denver Broncos as well in that organization. So when it comes to the Cincinnati Bengals and whether or not they're going to be able to compete in the AFC and compete for a Super Bowl, it's all going to ride on the health and that calf for Joe Burrow. And I felt like watching the game, you could tell that he was compromised, but he did just enough to get the Bengals the win and over the hump. And I thought that Zach Taylor as well, he got to do a better job of involving Joe Mixon in the running game. 19 carries for 65 rushing yards, 1 touchdown, averaged over 3 yards per carry. If Joe Burrow is compromised, Zach Taylor needs to run the football more with Joe Mixon. There's no reason why Joe Mixon should only have 19 carries. And Joe Burrow drops back the pass 49 times on a bad calf. I don't like the one pass and that the options what they have as far as the variety. Like, what is that? You have to run the football more. Like, I just don't like it. Like 49 pass attempts, only 20 rush attempts. I would like to see them run the football more and have Joe Burrow more closer to 30 or 35 pass attempts and have maybe 10 to 15 more carries for their running backs. You're dealing with a compromised quarterback. So the ratio between the run pass was bad last night for the Cincinnati Bengals. But I want to switch gears to the Bengals defense, because the Bengals defense, they played well last night. They played well. Matthew Stafford threw 2 interceptions, and the Bengals got 6 sacks as a defense. So everyone's talking about how, man, because I made a post last night on Facebook, and I talked about how the Rams are a mess. And I said the Rams, to me, are awful. And the reason why I made that post, I want to let everybody know, the reason why I made that post is because I felt like that game was for the taking. Like, I don't feel like the Bengals dominated the Rams the way that they were supposed to. Now, you can say the reason why they didn't dominate the Rams was because they didn't have a healthy Joe Burrow. That's fine. And I would agree with you. But I feel like the Bengals could have took control of this game and dominated this game from start to finish, and they didn't do that. And it could be because Joe Burrow was not 100% healthy, but I feel like overall the Bengals allowed the Rams to stay competitive in a game in which I don't even feel like the Rams should have been as close as they were. If Tutu Atwell's touchdown counts in the first quarter, then this entire complexion of the football game could be different. It could be different. Now, Logan Wilson did have 2 great interceptions, and the Bengals defense, they did a tremendous job against the Rams offensive line because they were able to sack Matthew Stafford 6 times. They also held the Rams in check in the running game. The Rams only had 71 rushing yards for the game. But I also blame head coach Sean McVay for the Rams only having 71 rushing yards for the game. They only ran the football with their running back, Kyron Williams, 10 times. 10 carries for Kyron Williams for 38 rushing yards. So they didn't run the football enough. The Rams did not run the football enough, and they also are beat up on that offensive line. In the game, the Rams suffered injuries on that offensive line. Their starting tackle, Alaric Jackson, left with a thigh injury, and they had to replace him with second-year lineman Zachary Thomas. So that Rams offensive line was compromised. So all these Bengal fans are going crazy talking about, give us credit for our defense. Give us credit for our defense. You were going up against a compromised Rams offensive line. Now, I know the Rams, in the first 2 weeks of the season, against the Seattle Seahawks and against the San Francisco 49ers, they played well. They played well. Now, coming into the season, I was clear that the Rams were not a playoff team in the NFC. I feel like the Rams, their window has closed. They won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, a team that had Odell Beckham. They had, on the defensive side of the ball, Jalen Ramsey. They also had Von Miller as well, Leonard Floyd. Those guys are no longer in L.A. And now they have a lot of players on their football team. You look at this Rams team in their secondary. In their secondary last night, they're starting Jordan Fuller, Kobe Durant, Russ Yeast. In that linebacker room, they got Christian Roseboom, Michael Hoek. This Rams team is now young. They just resemble the Rams that won the Super Bowl 2 years ago because they still got head coach Sean McVay. They still got quarterback Matthew Stafford. They still got Cooper Kupp. They still got Aaron Donald on the defensive side of the ball. So everyone is used to the Rams from 2 years ago, the team that won the Super Bowl, but they are no longer that same football team. They're not. This is why most people don't have the Rams in the playoffs, and this is why I'm not going to give the Bengals defense all this love and admiration that Bengal fans want me to give them. The Bengals defense in the last 2 years, they have been good. Because you never gave the Bengals defense credit. The Bengals defense over the last 2 years have been good. They're not great. Like when I think about the Cincinnati Bengals, the Bengals don't have a Nick Bosa like the San Francisco 49ers. They don't have a Micah Parsons like the Dallas Cowboys. They don't have a Sauce Gardner like the New York Jets. So to me, the Bengals are a good defense. In the last 2 years, they've been good. But in the first 2 weeks, teams were able to run the football against the Cincinnati Bengals defensively. The Cleveland Browns, they ran the ball effectively against the Bengals in week one. Week one, the Browns had 206 rushing yards. In week two, the Ravens had 178 rushing yards. So how are you a great defense, an elite defense, if you can't stop the run? Now, last night, the Rams didn't run the football enough. But to me, in order to be an elite defense, I want to see how you perform against elite offenses and elite quarterbacks. And so far this season, the Cincinnati Bengals gave up 24 to Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns. They gave up 27 to Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. I'm not going to pretend like the Bengals are this elite defensive football team because they held a Rams team without Cooper Kupp, without their left tackle. I'm not going to pretend like the Bengals defense is some elite defense and they held this team to 16 points and there were 4 points taken off the board if you consider the Tutu Atwell touchdown was called back. I need to see more. Do the Bengals have the capabilities of being a good defense? Absolutely. I don't see them being great, but they could be good. Last year, they were top 5 overall defensively. They're led by defensive coordinator Lou Admiral. And obviously, up front, you got DJ Reader. You got tremendous pass rushers in Trey Henderson and Sam Hubbard. And they both performed at a high level in last night's win over the Rams. At linebacker, you got Logan Wilson. I think Logan Wilson is a very underrated linebacker. He had 2 interceptions last night. But in the back end, that's to me where the Bengals defensively, that's their Achilles heel. In the back end, you let go of Von Bell and Jesse Bates, and you replace Bates and Bell with Dax Hill and Nick Scott. And Dax Hill had a great performance last night against the Rams. But I'm not ready to say that Dax Hill and Nick Scott are as good as Von Bell and Jesse Bates. I'm not ready to go there quite yet. So I need to see more from this Bengals defense before I can say that they are a top defense in the NFL and a quote-unquote good defense. They're never going to be great to me. They're not going to be great because they don't have one great player. But they got some good players. I like Logan Wilson. I like DJ Reader. Okay? So that's my takeaway on the overall game. Again, I don't think the Rams are a team that's going to be competing for a playoff spot. Yes, they beat the Seahawks in week 1. I think it was like 30-13, and they did compete with the San Francisco 49ers. But that game was majority in the 49ers' favor in week 2. The Niners had control of that entire football game. I know it was 17-17 at the half, but the Niners controlled that game in the second half. And it's the thing. Sean McVay was going up against coaches like Pete Carroll and Kyle Shanahan, and they're all familiar with one another. When it comes to division teams, you got to throw out the tape because the worst team in a particular division can actually compete with the best team in a particular division. There were times in the last few years where the Las Vegas Raiders and the Denver Broncos competed in games when they went up against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. But we know that they are not on the Chiefs level. And that's the same with the Rams. The Rams competed with the Seahawks, actually beat the Seahawks in week 1. And they competed against the 49ers, but they are not on the Seahawks or 49ers level. And to me last night, if the Bengals had played any other contender, not even a Super Bowl contender, just a playoff contender, like the Seattle Seahawks, they would have lost last night. If they played the Detroit Lions, they would have lost last night. If they played the Dallas Cowboys, because I don't even consider the Cowboys a Super Bowl contender. They're a playoff contender, but not a Super Bowl contender. They would have lost last night to the Dallas Cowboys. So, again, kudos to the Bengals for getting their first win of the season. Any win is a good win when you're 0-2, and being 1-2 is better than being 0-3. Bengals have the Titans Sunday afternoon in Nashville, and the L.A. Rams travel to Indianapolis to take on the 2-1 Indianapolis Colts.